Welcome to the Gist on Stat News Global. I'm Ramananda Sengupta. Today, we'll be discussing critical minerals, not just the ordinary minerals that you and I know about. And we have two eminent experts from the Center for Social and Economic Progress, Dr. Rajesh Chadha, Senior Fellow at the CSEP, who has worked extensively on the issues of international trade, FDI, non-fuel minerals, and mining in India, and held very senior advisory and academic positions before this. We also have Ganesh Sivamani, an associate fellow at the CSEP, particularly in the natural resources vertical, who's been working with Professor Chadha on the non-fuel minerals and mining in India research project. And they're both co-authors of a very interesting working paper on this subject, Projecting Critical Minerals Need for India's Energy Transition, how much of which minerals are needed for the transition. Did I get that right?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so let me start with Dr. Chadha. I'm sorry about the fluff up because my papers seem to be all messed up here. But let me start with Dr. Chadha. Dr. Chadha, when we talk about critical minerals, I mean, for a layman, how exactly would you define critical minerals?
So I think I need to clarify here that minerals are a very wide-ranging subject. They include fossil fuels on the one hand, they include oil on the other hand, but coal. But what we have been researching on are the non-fossil fuel minerals in India.
Mm-hmm.
And non-fossil fuel minerals in India would include what are so-called critical minerals as well as other minerals which are not so critical. They can so any non-fossil fuel mineral is our subject of study.
Mm-hmm.
However, what we realized, particularly during the COVID period, that the supply chains can get fractured at times,
Mm-hmm.
particularly for certain minerals where concentration in some specific countries, right? So we tried discussing what is the economic importance of each mineral. In our first study, we did for about 27 minerals. In our
Okay.
second study, we studied about 43 minerals.
Okay.
So what we want to study are two aspects of these minerals, that what is the economic importance, that
Uh-huh.
is how much of gross value added or GDP in a way would get affected if that mineral is suddenly not no more available.
Okay.
So the important that is the economic importance, and the
Mm-hmm.
second is of supply risk. Supply risks can be many, depending upon the concentration of the mining and processing in different countries. And processing and mining is heavily concentrated in certain countries. For
Mm-hmm.
example, rare earth elements, about 90% processing takes place in China. So I think it attracted our attention because we were going through the era when India is committing to net zero transition by 2070, and we
That's right.
started our work even before that. We started our work in 2020 and then
Mm-hmm.
published two papers in 21 and 22, and then finally this 23 paper is in a way a novel paper in the sense that it projects the, so I think I clarified first the two important dimensions on which the criticality is measured.
Mm-hmm.
A x-axis is economic importance, let's say, and
Right.
y-axis is the supply risk.
Right.
How are the supplies going to be affected?
Mm-hmm.
So those which are high, have high economic importance and high supply risks, we call them critical minerals.
Okay.
Uh, uh, there are various ways that one can think of critical minerals. It is defense included, aerospace included, but our attention more recently has been on the green transition that we have promised ourselves to.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
I'll
so
just interrupt you
we,
for a second, sir. I mean, for a common man, I mean, someone who doesn't understand science as much as the way you people do. How could you give me one example of, let's say, a critical mineral which people have heard of and a non-critical mineral? You mentioned, just so that
Yes,
people can differentiate between the two.
yes, Ganesh can participate.
Yes.
Sure. So, a critical mineral that's been on the news recently is lithium. Lithium is one of the most important minerals required for the green transition, specifically for
Right.
electric vehicle batteries, as well as battery
Okay.
energy storage systems, which
Hmm.
currently rely on lithium ion technologies. So,
Absolutely.
lithium is by and large one of the
Lithium has
largest.
definitely also been in the news. So yes,
It has been, especially with the
yes.
find last year in India.
Hmm.
A non-critical mineral, it can depend on various factors. As Professor Rav talked about, each country has their own assessment of economic importance and supply risks.
Hmm.
For India, for example, some of the less critical minerals could be those that are also easily available in the country. So minerals like limestone to some extent have lower supply risks because we have plenty of supply. Though
Okay.
it is economically important for India, it's not necessarily having high supply risks. So
Okay.
iron ore, bauxite, uh, manganese are some of the bulk minerals which are relatively less critical.
Hmm. So let me come back to you again, Dr. Chadha, that the paper talks about, let's say, supply chain issues, other issues that we face, and how we're going to tackle them. But now that you've done this particular study, what would you say is one of the biggest takeaways that you feel that people really should pay attention to from your paper? What would be one or two key factors that you feel that people should be interested about, should know about, so that it can be addressed? Because I suspect that not too many people know about critical minerals and their value. I know I didn't till some time back, so that makes a huge thing. So for the common person, if you could just explain, you know
So one thing that is important for everyone to understand, a
mhm,
common man as well as the policymaker and the
right.
researcher, that
Hmm.
uh, minerals which are non-fossil fuel minerals
Hmm.
did not get great attention. Not only in India, I think even US is suffering from the critical minerals availability. But I'm
Hmm.
talking about India in specific. You see, our geology belongs to old Gondwana region when Africa, India, and Australia were one landmass and which drifted
Okay.
away. So much of the geology of these regions would be similar. So what think the minerals that are available in South Africa and Western Australia are
Hmm.
likely to be available in India. I think what is first important thing is that there should be incentives to exploration,
Okay.
exploration within the country,
Hmm.
uh, because there is a likelihood of India having resources which have not yet been brought up to
Hmm.
after the initial reconnaissance, even though we have a very impressive department, Geological Survey of India. A lot
Right.
more needs to be done in exploration. That is the first step. I'm talking
Hmm.
about the mining to begin with.
Right.
Second is the processing. So, if we get mineral like lithium from Jammu and Kashmir, let's say after 6 years, what do we do with it? If we don't know how to process it, we may have to
Hmm.
export it for others to process for us, which is
Right.
again quite a complex things in various other minerals also.
Hmm.
Thirdly, when you talk of the supply chains, that is the step next forward, that if we do not have minerals in India, we can have mining facilities taken over in other parts of the geographies from where we
Right.
can bring the mineral in, process it there. So it's a very complex subject, starting from
Hmm.
reconnaissance to exploration to actual mining to processing, and then entering into the value chains, both the regional value chains and the global value
Hmm.
chains,
Of
and
course.
cooperation at the international level, like the one that US has set up, the one that we have been talking about between Quad ASEAN region. So uh, the mineral security participation has to be at various levels, and we
Hmm.
do have Kabil Khanij Videsh India Limited established with three
Okay.
public sector companies
Hmm.
who are looking at finding partners elsewhere in South America, Australia, and other places, so that India can be integrated with the global value chains. Given that
Hmm.
the concentration, for example, of cobalt, which is a very critical mineral for batteries, in Congo, rare earths in China, lithium in Australia, and some of the South American countries. So, yeah, the whole thing has to be an integrated way of thinking, and that is why
Right.
supply chains are important.
Hmm.
And the other takeaways are that we need to be thinking more about how to put the policies right as far as three things again:
Hmm.
exploration, extraction, processing,
Right. Hmm.
and integration with the global value chains or global
Got it.
supply chains. Over to
Great.
you, Ganesh.
I'll just come back to you again on that. But Ganesh, we were talking about mining domestically. We have laws, some of which I suppose are old, some which new ones that have done, and there's always this clash between mining and environmental concerns. Now, I understand environmental concerns is another one of your sort of interests. How does one balance the two? Because there are times when even if the government wants to do something, locals rise up and protest, and it becomes an issue. How does one balance the two? Is there some
Right.
kind of a benchmark you can place to sort of say that okay, we will do this and not do that?
My
Hmm. Yeah, so this is something that we have taken up from the start of our program
Hmm.
at our organization with the minerals and mining work that we do. We always consider both the efficient operations of the industry as well as the sustainable operations of the industry.
Right.
So we have been doing a lot of work on looking at sustainable mining activities through a paper
Hmm.
that we have on Sustainable Mining Attractiveness Index. It's called SMI, where we discuss how the districts of India can
Hmm.
implement or at least ensure the implementation of national or state level policies to ensure that both the communities and the environment are both well taken care of at any point in the mining activity processes. So we
Hmm.
have a lot of work done on the importance of engaging with local communities, not only from the moment mining starts, but well
Hmm.
before that as well, so that everyone is involved and everyone becomes active stakeholders in the process. So the government has done some work on improving the mining relations with local communities to the District Mineral Foundation funds, the DMF funds. We do have some research on it about how that can be improved, of course, but there has been a lot of discussion on ensuring that all mining activities are done responsibly for all the stakeholders involved.
Hmm. So, but how far has it been already been sort of initiated? Is this just still on paper, or has the work already begun? And
The DMF work has been happening for some time. It got
okay.
initiated back in 2015.
Hmm.
We have highlighted some concerns in terms of implementing the DMF to the spirit of what DMF was meant to be. But
Hmm.
at least there are some mechanisms in which the communities can gain the benefits of the mining activities. We have noted in our SMI paper how a large portion of the mineral wealth in India rests within the regions of some of the most impoverished regions of the country. So
Hmm.
there is a huge potential for mining-led sustainable development as long as the people and the environment are both taken into account and also brought along with the process. It can't be
Right.
an arm's length where people are consulted after the fact. It has to be done throughout the process, and a lot more should be done. A lot more can be done, but there are some steps that are being taken in the right direction.
Hmm. That's good to hear. I mean, it's interesting because Dr. Chadha, You mentioned that critical minerals are sort of things that perhaps India, is in short supply of a particular mineral. But would, let's say, another country which has a lot of it, would it still be a critical mineral for them?
Well, as Ganesh has already pointed out, that every country would have its own ifs and buts, and what are the critical minerals for country A may not necessarily be nickel, may not be critical for Indonesia, which has a lot of nickel already
Hmm.
in it. So every country would have a different list, and they actually come out with frequently
Hmm.
2 years or 3 years. US has now, EU has. So now what we have. So one of the things that we would like to mention is that our work created enough,
Interest.
thought process that India's first list of 30 critical minerals was declared after our work, and
Oh,
we have
yes,
been
I remember that. Yes, that
yes,
was
we have
your,
been
yes.
quoted multiple
Mhm.
times in that.
But you've
So
added to that list, haven't you? You've now
yes,
added to that list subsequently.
yes, we
Hmm.
no, we have been continuously working. We have been working since 2019, and
Hmm.
and the issues that we have brought up are not merely of extracting in India, but also how can we globally source. That thought process has also begun.
Hmm.
Should it be government to government, business to business, government to business? But on your earlier question, I think I like to add to what Ganesh has already said
Hmm.
in detail, that from the beginning, the work that we are doing, I being an economist by training, have been
Hmm.
thinking on uh, the two sides of economics, positive
Right.
economics as well as normative economics. So,
Hmm.
positive economics refers to what Ganesh said, that we want to make the operations as efficient. So, a miner should not have a complaint, or a processor should not have a complaint that in another country much more could have been done. So, we should provide them
Okay.
with all the best practices that, or
Hmm.
good practices that others are adopting, but at the same time we are mindful of the normative economics. And we have two editions on sustainable mining attractiveness index. One was done
Hmm.
for districts of Jharkhand, and the second
Okay.
one was done for 323 districts of 12 major mining states. And there you can see that we are equally concerned about the socio-economic, law and order, and infrastructure issues at
Hmm.
a district level, not even at state level, at a district
Right.
level. And
Hmm.
that what we think is important is to keep the people, keep the common man on the potential mining regions knowledgeable about the pluses and minuses of the mining activity. So externalities can take place in two ways. One is the environment gets affected. All of us get affected in that sense.
Hmm.
But the local people more so, because their water impurities can increase, and they can be displaced from their, or forests can be removed, or
Right.
so. So one is the environmental considerations.
Hmm.
Others are the communities considerations. So any mining activity has to more than offset
Hmm.
the environmental and communities external negative externalities that will be caused. So that principle has to be kept in mind, and I think that before a mine gets clearance,
Hmm.
the policy regime does take these things into account. But I think more and more needs to be done, and that's what we have been. So for anybody to see, it's very simple. There are more than 45 references created, or maybe 50, close to 50.
Hmm.
If somebody visits CSEP minerals, that's all.
Right.
CSEP minerals
Hmm.
will be taken to a page, or a link at our organization, which will give
Which has a
all
whole
the
whole row of papers on this subject.
yes, CSEP minerals is
Hmm.
enough to see the kind of work we have been doing since 2019, and we have another 5 years in horizon already planned for what all we are going to do. And will be moving from green technologies to electric vehicles now, because
Yes.
electric
So that's a
vehicles.
totally huge domain by itself.
Yes, yes. What we have done in the paper that you are referring to
Hmm.
is the solar panels, wind
Wind and stuff.
turbines, and battery
Mhm.
storage.
Yes.
And what we have done, we have based our analysis on already. So it's not that we are rediscovering the wheel. No, there is very good analysis done by Central Electricity Authority on how the
Mhm.
electricity, the green part of the electricity is going to progress. Then
Right.
Niti Aayog has its reports on estimating up to 2047 what kind of
Hmm.
green technologies would be there under different scenarios. So we have
Right.
used that information and
Mhm.
done the quantitative work on it, and hence come to this paper, which is the first of its kind in projecting the needs for critical minerals, which critical
Sweet.
minerals, by how much.
Hmm.
Obviously, these projections can be subject to question, and we acknowledge that because the technologies can change very fast. Battery technology can change fast, but that does not mean that we should not be studying. We should be
Absolutely.
studying even more.
Hmm.
Every 1 year, every 2 years, we should be looking forward to how the future looks like, and how much work that is required from the policymakers, the industry, and the research institutions uh, is
Speaking of
required.
work, sir, speaking of work, I mean, I am amazed at the kind of work. It's not just research, but a lot of sort of, boots on the ground kind of stuff that you've apparently done. Because not just sitting in a room and, doing research. I can see that you've already gone and asked people to go meet people and talk to them and get their feedback. And then it's like an immense amount of
Yeah,
work
we have
involved.
already, by the way, presented our work at three of the most eminent international conferences,
Hmm.
PDAC, Prospectors and Developer Association Canada in 2019.
Hmm.
Then last year in 2023, we present our work on normative economics that you are talking about,
Hmm.
taking care of the communities and environment, was presented at World Mining Congress, which is held
Hmm.
once in 4 years in Brisbane. And one of our foreign policy colleagues attended yet another conference in Africa. They are the three top best conferences, and we also presented our work on critical minerals in the GTAP annual conference in 2022, if I'm not
Hmm.
wrong. It was not 23, in 2022. Global Trade Analysis Project is a
Hmm.
Purdue University project which holds an annual conference where we presented our work on critical minerals 2 years ago when we were doing
Hmm.
our first edition. And so,
Okay.
and we did our second edition last year, and then we have now started working on the
The third
projections.
one. Ganesh, it's interesting that, I think the government has a lot of rules regarding mining, particularly when it comes to stuff like uranium and things like that, which they think is, strategically important. Now, I understand that, only government-based mining bodies can extract those and nobody else can touch them. And there's a whole bunch of laws around that. How does that impact the kind of, policy uh, changes that you would like to see? Would that have a difference? I mean, would that make a difference in that?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, the government has taken a pretty good step last year through the amendments of the Mines and Minerals Development and Regulation Act (MMDR). So
Hmm.
last year they have opened up private sector mining of various minerals which were earlier considered to be atomic minerals.
Okay.
So atomic minerals like uranium, thorium, and so on are found naturally along with some of these critical minerals, especially the rare earth elements in India. So if you go
Hmm.
to the beach sand, you'll find alongside atomic minerals, you'll find your rare earths, you can find titanium and so on. So by opening up the sector and allowing for some non-atomic minerals, which may be found alongside the atomic minerals, the government has given a fillip to boosting private sector participation in critical minerals mining. So there has been
Okay.
some progressive steps, and over the last few months, the government has announced three tranches of auctions of critical minerals. It's yet to be seen how successful they have been. Unfortunately, the lithium mine in Kashmir may have had a lukewarm response, so there might be some other policy concerns that we have also talked about. One of the
Hmm.
major ones is the allocation of natural resources. So, back in 2015, the government decided to switch the allocation process away from first come, first serve towards the auction
Hmm.
process. So the first come first serve process is actually a system followed globally. However, in the Indian context, due to some irregularities in earlier allocations, the judiciary came out with certain recommendations and comments on how to make the system more fair, objective, and transparent. So the government took cognizance of these issues and decided to switch towards an auction mechanism. However, we've talked about in our research the caveats with this system and how it actually is not the way global mining practices happen. And for that reason, we
I just have a quick question for you before I come back to Dr. Chadha. I'm sorry I'm interrupting you because now
please.
that you mentioned it, you brought it up. When you say private players are being asked to get into this particular industry and they're allowed to now mine for critical minerals, once they mine it, does it belong to them and they sell it to the government, or does the government own it directly? I mean, how does it work?
So the way
India.
it works in India is that mining comes under the concurrent list. So both the state and the center have certain say over the mining sector. The
Hmm.
central government actually sets the overall rules regarding mining policies for major minerals, whereas the states actually have ownership of the minerals. And they also
Okay.
set rules for minor minerals. Minor minerals include your
Hmm.
building materials like sand, gravel, etc. So to answer your specific question, the ownership of minerals always belong with the state governments. What the state
Okay.
governments do is provide a lease to companies to allow them to mine out the minerals and sell the minerals. But when they sell the minerals, they have to pay royalties to the state government. So the royalties is the payment that's due to the states in exchange for the
Hmm.
right to mine and sell the minerals. The royalty rates is set. Sorry.
I'll interrupt you. I was thinking that if it's a critical mineral and we don't want it to be sold elsewhere, then the government would have first right to take that, right?
Oh, right. So that actually exists already in multiple countries, and this is a
Hmm.
term that's being dubbed as resource nationalism. So countries like Indonesia, Chile, Zimbabwe, Congo have all talked about how to prevent minerals from being sold elsewhere. And to do
Right.
that, you can put something as simple as export embargo and say you can't export any critical mineral unless so and so conditions are met. So there are other
Hmm.
mechanisms in place. I think still
Hmm.
bringing in private sector, so that's a different issue. But in terms of actually enabling an efficient and sustainable development of the sector, it seems private sector is where a lot of the growth can take place, especially when they bring in investment and capacities.
Yes, but
And is sorry, yeah.
no. I would have thought that normally the private sector is a bit suspicious of such government things when they say anytime they want they can just take over. So there would be a bit of
They might absolutely. And
suspicion
that
there.
is a concern in other countries where private sector suddenly has been told that they're no longer allowed to sell their minerals.
Hmm.
So what usually governments require is for the minerals to be processed within the country, and in some
Hmm.
extent also value added within the country to, let's say, a battery grade level. So those are some of the policies that can be put in place to ensure minerals stay within India for as long as possible, and a lot of value addition can take place. But that's a different side of the story, away from the mining side. It's
I
more
know
about
this is such a wide subject that we could talk about it for the whole day and still not get
manufacturing. Yeah, it's a huge can of worms, really.
Hmm. But while I'd love to do that, I noticed that we seem to be already nearing our sort of closing time. And Dr. Chandra, let me ask you a last question, which I was trying to say for the last. I've been hearing that when we talked about supply chains and all that, that China already seems to have a huge sort of a supply chain lined up as far as critical minerals that we need are involved. Number one, they're also, I think, involved in 80% of the processing of these minerals across the world. Is that a correct number? 80%? Now,
For rare earth elements, yes, it is close to 90%. But
Good Lord.
for
Okay.
lithium also it is close to to the best of my remembrance it is 65 to 70%.
That's
And
still a
that,
very large number.
yes, but that makes India all the more for India all the more reason to be
Mhm.
participating in the global supply chains. And
Yes.
if India can somehow does do it on its own in some ways, but I
Hmm.
think it is important also to find the mines and processing facilities wherever we can do it efficiently for
You
in other
mentioned
countries.
Africa, Latin America, places like that
Yes,
earlier,
yes, yes, and Australia we can have a,
and Australia,
and
Australia.
Australia. So I
Hmm.
think it is time to look at South America, Africa, Australia, and there are discussions already going on, and so a lot more needs to be done, and I think we will be doing it
You're
for the
saying
coming.
that again. I mean, I understand you're stressing on that particular aspect, but a lot more needs to be done. All these places that you already mentioned, China is already very active in those areas. They've already locked up most of the resources there. Are we sort of going to be there and say "me too" kind of a thing, or I mean, will we only get the second best from that?
Yeah, yeah. Why not? We too. Because India needs to uh, make its put its best foot forward both in mining and manufacturing, because what I probably should also emphasize is that
Hmm.
mining is sometimes not a very openly talked issue, as if it is not, because my earlier years were spent doing international trade, a very fashionable
Hmm.
subject. But when I started touching upon mining, uh, I was thinking that what can I do? And when I discovered that we together as researchers and policymakers and the industry can really make a difference, because mining is what agriculture is to food self-sufficiency, mining is to
Absolutely.
manufacturing self-sufficiency. So we cannot talk of efficient manufacturing and manufacture in India if we do not have the necessary minerals processed and available to us. So one has to think in vertical integration of mining with manufacturing. So saying
Hmm.
that we should do extremely well in manufacturing, but we won't do mining is as good as saying that we won't have the grassroots, but we'll have the trees available for us, or we will not have. So we have to be grounded well, but at this, I should stop at saying that not at the cost of, not at the cost of externalities hurting the communities and the environment. And I generally call it a Swachh Khadan Abhiyan. So
Okay.
the mining should be good, but it should be neat and it should be clean. So
Hmm.
Swachh Khadan
How?
Abhiyan, I have been telling many people that, and that the potential areas communities should be educated about, that 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 at the end of the day it is beneficial because they are sitting over billions of dollars worth of resources. So if
Hmm.
they can be stakeholders in the entire process and benefit also, so it's a win-win game for the country as well as the communities.
Wonderful. That's interesting. I just was curious to ask if you could just quickly tell me how far do you think we're down that road of actually, all these things that you suggested. Are we halfway there? Are we quarter of the way there? Are we almost there?
I will say we are there in the sense that rules and regulations have been framed,
Hmm.
and as Ganesh has already pointed out, if you read our paper on district mineral foundations, that is
Hmm.
called PM Khanij. Uh,
No, I can't remember.
ah, PMKKKY,
Okay.
Khanij Kalyan Yojana,
Hmm.
Khanij Khadan Kalyan Yojana, where a part of the payments to the government would be put into a fund called District Mineral Foundation Fund, which will
Mhm.
be for the benefit of the communities which have been affected. So you can see in our paper that we are yet not there, and certain things have to be done on priority.
Right.
So, but we have yet to go into more in-depth analysis by holding focus group discussions, going to the people affected, and much more to be done on the environmental side of it. That also we are we are working separately on. I'll not go into that discussion today.
Mhm.
Um,
That's, one of the reasons why I came to the two of you is that I also believe that this kind of thing needs as much publicity as is necessary, because people are aware of the issues involved. But unfortunately, it's such a wide subject that you can't really, you have to take it into subject wise, dice it up into it. So maybe I'd like to have the two of you again for another. Once you do your EV report, maybe we could catch up again. That would be interesting.
yes,
But I'm
so
afraid I must.
I would say that let us hope for the best of the country in both ways,
Mhm, mhm.
in positive economics ways as well as normative economics ways, and let us not lose sight of the fact that much more research is required. We have,
Of course.
I will say, we have just started. A lot more has to be done. More the merrier. Other research institutes should also be looking into these aspects. Many of the research institutes are looking at particular engineering aspects, or but a wide bird's overview, eye view, or looking at
Mhm.
from 30,000 feet height as well as at the
Right.
ground level. All of that is required, but we are
Absolutely, sir.
obviously limited in
No,
our.
I'm sure that with people like you at the helm of these things, we will get there very, very fast. I mean, the two of you, I can see that you're very committed to this. With that, I must unfortunately call this interview to an end. Thank you so much, Dr. Chadha. Thank you, Ganesh. Because I suspect I didn't get half the things I really wanted to ask from you, but I'll come to you personally perhaps one of these days and, harass you. Thank you so very much,
Nice,
the two of you. It's been a
nice
pleasure
talking to
talking to
you.
you.
Nice talking to
Thank you
you.
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was Dr. Rajesh Chadha and Ganesh Sivamani from the Center for Social and Economic Progress, talking to us about critical minerals, particularly in relation to the energy sector, and explaining the challenges and the opportunities and the issues involved. I do hope you like this particular episode of The Gist. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Until we meet again, this is Ramananda Sengupta signing out.